At my own birthday dinner, my mother leaned across the table with a smile. That looked more like a queen handing down orders than a loving parent celebrating her daughter. Then, in a low voice, she whispered to my father, "Well, everyone's here. Tell your son to go change the locks at her apartment." The soft clinking of forks instantly stopped. My brother didn't even blink. He didn't ask why. He simply stood up and walked out like it was the most normal thing in the world to break into his own sister's life on her birthday. Man, it was messed up, but nobody around that table acted like anything was wrong. For the next hour, the cheerful laughter slowly faded into quiet whispers. Then Nathan came back. His face was ghost white, and his hands were shaking. "Mom, there's something," he said. Her confident smile disappeared in a heartbeat. My stomach dropped. Whatever he had seen inside my apartment, it wasn't something anyone was ever supposed to find. People love talking about family like it's all warmth, birthday candles, hugs, and memories that last forever. That's the picture they paint. Mine looked that way too, at least from the outside. Perfect Christmas photos, matching sweaters, polite conversations about vacations, promotions, and everyone's latest achievements. But the truth? It was all one big show. My mother, Mrs. Reeves, directed every scene. My father quietly funded the performance. And my brother, Nathan, was always the golden child, the star of every act. As for me, I learned my role before I was old enough to understand it. Stay quiet. Don't argue. Never ruin the image. If Nathan forgot to call, Mom would shrug and say he's busy. If I missed one family dinner because of work, suddenly I was selfish and ungrateful. Funny how every mistake somehow ended up being mine. For years, I honestly believed that if I worked harder, got better grades, earned more promotions, and proved myself enough, maybe, just maybe, she'd finally look at me the way she looked at him. Turns out, I was dead wrong. Control doesn't disappear when you become successful. It just finds a new way to hold on. That whisper at the restaurant wasn't random. Nah, she'd planned the whole thing. I could see it in every tiny detail. The seating arrangement. Nathan beside Dad. Me sitting across from them like I wasn't family at all. Just another person watching the show. Even the birthday cake was his favorite flavor. Not mine. That should have told me everything. When she quietly said, "Well, everyone's here," she wasn't talking about convenience. She wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses. Power was always more important to her than love. Dad never questioned her either. He never had. After decades of keeping the peace, he'd become nothing more than an echo of her decisions. He casually muttered, "Do it after dessert," like he was reminding someone to pick up milk from the grocery store. Nathan nodded without hesitation, always eager to please, always ready to obey. I remember tracing my finger around the rim of my water glass, pretending I hadn't heard any of it, pretending I didn't care. But inside, my chest was burning. Change the locks at my apartment? Why? What had I supposedly done this time? I'd lived in my own apartment in Portland for almost 3 years. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a small, cozy place where my son, Liam, and I had built a peaceful little life together. It was ours. Our safe place. Or at least, I thought it was. As far as I knew, nobody else had a key. Or so I believed. When Nathan walked out of the restaurant, I stayed in my chair. Mom immediately went right back to chatting with relatives in her sweet, polished voice, acting like she hadn't just ordered someone to invade my home. Dad quietly swirled his wine, wearing that familiar weak smile while pretending not to notice my silence. I finally excused myself and headed toward the restroom. Not because I needed it, because I needed to breathe. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked perfectly calm. My makeup was untouched. My lipstick was still flawless. My hair was neat. Nobody would have guessed the storm raging behind my eyes. By the time I came back, nearly an hour had passed. Nathan was already sitting in his chair again. Only this time, he looked terrified. His face had gone completely pale, and his whole body trembled. He leaned toward Mom, his voice cracking. "There's something you need to see." Her posture stiffened instantly. "What do you mean?" Nathan hesitated. His eyes briefly met mine before darting away. Then he swallowed hard. "There's police tape around her door." The entire table went silent. Mom's fork slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the plate. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Because right then, I realized the real birthday dinner hadn't even started yet. The drive home felt endless. Streetlights flashed across my windshield like heart monitors, steady, cold, and impossible to ignore. My phone kept buzzing nonstop. Mom, Dad, even Nathan. I didn't answer a single call. The city outside looked exactly the same as always, but deep down, I could feel something shifting. Something that wasn't ever going back to the way it used to be. When I pulled into my apartment complex, 2 police cruisers were parked near the entrance. Blue and red lights pulsed across the brick buildings, throwing strange shadows everywhere. My stomach twisted. Honestly, I barely remember getting out of the car. I just remember the crunch of gravel beneath my heels. And a uniformed officer walking toward me. "Ms. Reeves?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm Officer Grant. Are you the tenant of Unit 214? "Yes," I answered. "What's going on?" He glanced down at his notebook. "We received a report of a break-in. Your apartment door was forced open. At this point, it doesn't appear that anything has been stolen. But we've sealed the unit while we investigate." I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. A break-in? My voice barely came out. But who would do that? Officer Grant paused before asking the next question. "Does anyone besides you have a key to the apartment?" My throat tightened. "My brother, Nathan Reeves." He looked up immediately. "And why would your brother have a key?" I hesitated for only a second. "Because my mother told him to." The officer studied me for a moment, his pen hovering over the page. "Your mother instructed him to do what exactly?" "To change my locks." He slowly exhaled through his nose while writing another note. "Well, that's one heck of an instruction." "I never gave anyone permission," I said quietly. He nodded. "We'll be reviewing the building's security footage. In the meantime, I'd recommend staying somewhere else tonight." But I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the ground. Through the cracked open doorway, I could see my living room. Nothing looked trashed. Nothing appeared to be missing. Yet somehow, everything had changed. The feeling of safety I'd built inside those walls was gone. Then something caught my eye. The framed photos of Liam and me hanging on the wall. Every single one had been turned upside down, one by one. My breath caught. "Officer." I pointed toward the wall. "The pictures." Grant stepped inside carefully, his flashlight sweeping across the room. His beam landed on the coffee table. There was a single white envelope sitting perfectly in the center. Nothing else. He handed me a pair of gloves. "You should open it." My hands trembled as I carefully slid the paper out. Inside was one short printed sentence. "Tell your mother the truth always finds its way home." The room suddenly felt colder. Officer Grant frowned. "Does that message mean anything to you?" I slowly shook my head. "No, but my heart knew the truth. Those words weren't written for me. They were meant for her. A warning. Somewhere between that birthday dinner and this very moment. The perfect little kingdom my mother had spent decades controlling had started to crack. She just didn't know it yet. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that envelope again. Those words kept staring back at me like a challenge I couldn't ignore. By morning, the rain still hadn't let up. Heavy drops slammed against the windows in uneven bursts, making the silence inside the apartment feel even louder. When my phone rang again, I assumed it was Mom. It wasn't. "Ms. Reeves, this is Officer Grant." His calm, professional voice immediately got my attention. "We traced a payment made to Thomas Hale, the building's maintenance assistant." I sat up straight. "The payment came from a bank account registered under your mother's name." For a second, I couldn't even breathe. "You're absolutely sure?" "Yes, ma'am. The timeline matches, and so does the note we recovered. We believe your mother hired Mr. Hale to retrieve something from your apartment. Retrieve what? Even as I asked the question, I already knew the answer. Grant hesitated. That's what we're trying to determine. I'd advise speaking with your mother directly, but be careful. After the call ended, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone still clutched in my hand. She had actually hired someone. My own mother. The woman who spent her entire life preaching about trust, honesty, and reputation. Had committed a crime just to invade my home. Then I remembered the box I'd found in my closet only a month earlier. The one labeled, Dad's business papers. At the time, I'd assumed it had been misplaced. Inside were property deeds, wire transfer records, financial statements, documents carrying my name. Back then, I'd convinced myself it was probably just a clerical mistake. Now? No way. None of it had been accidental. Those papers weren't mistakes. They were camouflage. And someone had become desperate enough to break into my apartment to get them back. By late afternoon, I'd made up my mind. I sent my mother a simple text. Dinner. My place. 7:00 p.m. No games this time. Her reply came almost instantly. Fine. But be ready for the truth. Yeah. Somehow, she always managed to act like she was the victim. Right at 7:00. There was a soft knock at my door. Slow. Deliberate. Exactly like her. She stepped inside wearing expensive perfume and the same quiet confidence she'd carried her entire life. The room practically filled with her presence. You shouldn't have involved the police, she said before I could even speak. I folded my arms. You shouldn't have hired someone to break into my home. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You don't understand what's really happening. Then explain it. Her eyes slowly wandered around the apartment before settling on the family photos that were still turned upside down. Finally, she spoke. Those documents you found. Your father's business isn't as simple as you think. I stayed silent. Thomas was only supposed to retrieve them quietly before you did something reckless. A dry laugh escaped my lips. You mean before I figured out you've been using my name to cover up your fraud? Her face instantly hardened. Watch your tone, Evelyn. For the first time in my life, I didn't lower my voice. No, Mom. I took one slow step toward her. You watch yours. Thunder rolled outside, rattling the windows as if the sky itself had been waiting for this moment. Rain streaked across the glass in crooked silver lines beneath the streetlights. My mother stood perfectly still in the center of my living room. Elegant heels. Perfect posture. Pearl necklace glowing against her black coat. If guilt had a dress code, she'd absolutely nailed it. I was protecting you, she said calmly. Almost gently. I tilted my head. By breaking into my apartment? You don't understand. She started pacing. Your father's company has complications. Partnerships that can't become public. Complications. I let out another bitter laugh. You mean crimes? Her eyes narrowed. Don't twist my words. I'm not twisting anything. I looked her straight in the eyes. You used my name. You forged my signature on property deeds. You signed transfer documents pretending to be me. You didn't protect this family. You used me. You stole my future. For the first time, I saw it. Not guilt. Fear. Real fear. She turned toward the window, pretending to study the rain outside. Evelyn. Her voice softened. Listen carefully. If those documents become public, your father could go to prison. I crossed my arms again. Maybe you should. She spun around so fast her coat flared behind her. You wouldn't dare. A small smile crossed my face. I already did. Her expression froze. I gave every document to Officer Grant. The color drained from her face. What? You wanted those papers out of my apartment. I shrugged. So I delivered them somewhere you couldn't reach. The police have everything. Lightning flashed across the windows, splitting her reflection into pieces. For just a second, she didn't look like my mother anymore. She looked like someone who'd finally run out of places to hide. You're destroying this family, she whispered. I slowly stepped closer. No. You destroyed this family the moment you decided I was your shield. She backed away as if I'd slapped her. You have no idea what you're doing. Oh, I do. Every word came out steady. I'm finally doing something you never taught me. I'm setting boundaries. The silence between us became almost unbearable. Years of manipulation. Years of guilt. Years of pretending. Every scar we'd ignored was suddenly standing in the room with us. Alive. Breathing. Her eyes sparkled. Not with sadness. With pure anger. You think you're strong because you've got the law behind you? She laughed coldly. You're naive. I didn't flinch. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. Her laugh became even sharper. You'll regret this. Maybe. I nodded. But at least it'll be my regret. The room fell completely silent. Only the rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere outside, a car horn echoed through the night. She stood there breathing hard. For a moment, I honestly couldn't tell whether she wanted to scream, cry, or lunge across the room. Finally, she said the one thing she'd always believed would control me. If you go through with this, you'll never have a family again. I met her eyes without looking away. Then maybe. It's time I build one that's actually worth having. She froze. The mask slid right back into place. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. The sharp click of her heels across the hardwood floor sounded like an entire family legacy breaking apart. Just before she reached the handle, I spoke one last time. One more thing. She stopped, but she didn't turn around. You asked why someone flipped the photos in my apartment. She remained silent. I looked at the pictures hanging on my wall. Maybe because even a complete stranger could tell which way was right side up. Her hand trembled. Just once. Then she opened the door and disappeared into the storm. The thunder swallowed the sound of her footsteps. For a long time, I stood there staring at the doorway. My hands were shaking. Not because I was scared anymore. Because, for the first time, I felt free. I walked over to the table where the white envelope still rested. Without hesitation, I tore it cleanly in half. Then I dropped both pieces into the trash. This silence wasn't surrender anymore. It was ownership. It was peace. The next morning, I met Officer Grant at the station. My hair was still damp from the rain, and the air outside carried that fresh, washed-clean smell after a long storm. He greeted me with a quiet nod before leading me into a small conference room. You sure you're ready for this? He asked. I didn't hesitate. I'm done covering for them. He slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were copies of every document I'd handed over. Property deeds, wire transfers, bank statements, forgery records. There was also official confirmation that my parents' financial assets had been frozen. While investigators built their case, Grant looked me straight in the eye. Once financial crimes takes over, they'll launch a full investigation. He paused. And for the record, Ms. Reeves, you'll be cleared of all liability. A breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding slowly escaped my chest. Good. He gave a small nod. You know this is going to make headlines. I know. I closed the folder. But at least this time, the headlines will actually tell the truth. By the time I walked out of the precinct, the clouds had finally started breaking apart. Thin beams of sunlight slipped through the gray sky like they were testing whether it was finally safe to come out. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the hospital to pick up Liam. The moment he spotted me, he came running with the biggest grin on his face. A shiny gold star sticker was proudly stuck across his shirt. Mom, he wrapped his little arms around me. Look, I got a star for being brave. I smiled and hugged him tighter. So did I, buddy. You just can't see mine yet. He giggled. He didn't understand what I meant. Honestly, he didn't need to. We drove home quietly. His tiny hand rested on my arm almost the entire ride. Outside, the streets looked different. Cleaner. Brighter. Like the whole city had finally taken a deep breath. Back home, I made pancakes exactly the way Liam loved them. Way too much syrup. Not nearly enough patience. He talked nonstop about school. His friends. The rocket he planned to build in the backyard. And for the first time in years, I wasn't listening while waiting for disaster to strike. Nothing was chasing me anymore. The calls kept coming. Reporters, relatives, lawyers, people who suddenly wanted answers. I ignored every single one. Let them talk. The truth didn't need me to defend it anymore. That night, after Liam had gone to bed, I stood by the living room window. Rain still clung to the glass while city lights shimmered beyond it. For the first time, I thought about my parents without feeling angry. Just clear. They'd taught me something after all. Not intentionally, but they had. They showed me the difference between love and control, between loyalty and silence, and somewhere between their lies and my truth. I'd finally found myself. The next morning, I walked into the post office carrying one final envelope. Inside were the remaining documents connecting my parents to several offshore accounts. No dramatic letter. No personal message. Just evidence. Just the truth. As I sealed the envelope, I whispered to myself, "This ends here." Outside, the morning air felt cool, bright, and honest. I walked toward my car with something I'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. News spreads fast when money and scandal collide. Within a week, every local news station was covering the investigation. Prominent couple under federal review for identity fraud. My phone lit up around the clock. Journalists. Attorneys. Extended relatives pretending they were just checking in. Yeah, right. I answered exactly none of them. People could speculate all they wanted. I was done explaining myself. Back at home, everything finally felt different. The family photos had been turned right side up again. Every frame sat perfectly straight on the wall. Liam's laughter echoed through rooms that had once been filled with fear. Sometimes, late at night, I'd still catch myself expecting my phone to ring with Mom's name flashing across the screen. It never did. Not because she'd accepted what happened. Because shame had finally replaced control. Dad resigned from his company the very same day the investigation became public. The firm's official statement blamed health concerns. Nobody believed it. Mom quietly disappeared from every social circle she'd spent decades trying to impress. No charity galas. No neighborhood committees. No book club. No picture-perfect appearances. For someone who'd built her entire identity on keeping up appearances, silence turned out to be the harshest punishment of all. A few days later, Officer Grant called again. "You've officially been cleared, MS. Reeves. The investigation is moving forward." I smiled. "Thank you for believing me." He chuckled softly. "You didn't need me to believe you. You just needed to believe yourself." After we hung up, I looked around my apartment. The same living room that had been invaded, violated, and finally reclaimed. The space itself felt lighter, almost like it could breathe again. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and opened the window. Outside, the city buzzed with life. Car horns, footsteps, neighbors talking. A world that didn't care who I'd once been, only who I chose to become. That weekend, I invited a few close friends over for dinner. The people who'd stayed beside me when everything else fell apart. We barely mentioned my parents. We didn't have to. Nina raised her glass with a smile. To freedom. And to never apologizing for protecting yourself. I laughed and lifted mine. I'll definitely drink to that. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I tucked Liam into bed. Half asleep, he looked up at me. "Mom, are we safe now?" I brushed his hair away from his forehead and smiled. "Yeah, baby. We're safe now." He sighed softly and drifted back to sleep. And for the first time in years, I believed those words with my whole heart. The following morning, warm sunlight poured through the kitchen window, filling the room with soft golden light. Liam sat at the table swinging his legs beneath the chair. Syrup smeared across one cheek while I flipped another pancake. I watched the sunlight stretch across the floor. It almost looked like it was drawing brand new boundaries. Boundaries that finally belonged to me. I'd spent years trying to keep the peace. Turns out, peace isn't something you spend your life protecting. It's something you choose to claim. I poured another cup of coffee, looked over at my son, and smiled. This time, I said quietly, the locks stay mine.